Well, anyone who knows me will probably by now know that I rarely would pick up a book, or I probably wouldn't even think about a book for weeks and weeks that deals with terminal illness, Russian politics, or the game of chess. However, our guest today on the show has done just that, combined all three of those topics into a book that is really fun to read, and it's a novel which I have my questions about. It's called A Partial History of Lost Causes. Jennifer DuBois joins us. Thanks for being here, Jennifer.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, you know what, as I just said, those are three topics that I'm like, I don't know, man, I don't know, Russian politics, historical stuff, I don't know, chess, really? But what a great book. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really try to tell people that it does have moments of wit and, you know, humor and beauty, and it's not quite as grim as it sounds offhand, so I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks.
Well, not only that, but I actually found myself getting sucked into the chess, maybe not so much, but you know, that weaves throughout the whole story. But the Russian political history, actually, I was quite fascinated by, and I have a lot of questions about, you know, your knowledge of the topic, which I was like, don't know a lot of people who know all the stuff about Russia. Would you mind indulging us with your own synopsis of the book? Because I find it hard to just say exactly what it is. It'd be great if we could hear it from you.
Sure. Yeah, it is. A little bit hard to boil into a talking point, but it is about two characters who have very different situations in their lives, but are kind of confronting the same sort of underlying fundamental challenge. So one character is this young woman named Irina, who is positive for Huntington's disorder, which she'd watched her father die of, and that's this terrible degenerative neurological disorder. And so she's kind of at loose ends and looking for meaning in her life, and wondering, you know, how do you proceed when you're facing a lost cause. And then Alexander Bezatov is this chess champion turned political dissident in Russia, as you say, who's running for president against Vladimir Putin, which is not going well, as you can imagine. So he too is kind of confronting the question of how do you proceed when you are probably facing a not so great outcome. So the two threads sort of entangle and weave together.
And they eventually converge, and actually I was very happy because it's not like they converge at the end of the book, but there's like a whole slew of chapters about how their lives intermingle at the end there. But an obvious question is your knowledge of Russia. Now, I had the fortunate experience of going to Moscow in 1988, so this was before the wall came down, and a lot of this is really recognizable. I mean, the KGB prostitutes, the worms coming out of the faucets, you know, all of this stuff. How did you learn about all this?
Well, I actually got to go to Russia in 1990 when I was young, and that was also a pretty interesting time to be there, although I don't pretend that I really internalized the geopolitical complexities of the place at that age. It was a really interesting time with kind of an interesting energy, and I think that that's what sort of sparked my interest in the place. But then, you know, when I was writing the book, honestly, the research was I just kind of did it the old-fashioned way. I just sort of read everything I could get my hands on, you know, nonfiction books about politics and travelogues, memoirs, and this sort of massive tome that's a cultural history of St. Petersburg, and then I would sort of creepily go online and look at people's publicly available like vacation photos to be able to see what modern day St. Petersburg looks like. And I eventually got to go back there in 2010 after I mostly drafted the book and kind of shove in retroactively some images that I'd seen, but most of it was just books and then you know, a lot of Googling.
And so what was really fun, and you did this in an interesting way, is you kind of intermingled historical fact with a novel, whereas in fact Alexander, the chess champion, plays against Deep Blue, IBM, and that of course actually did happen, only it was Kasparov who fought that battle. So, I mean, you really were, you know, treading a thin line there between real history and your fiction.
Yeah, a lot of well, some of Alexander's characters based on Gary Kasparov, sort of the broad journey of this this chess champion turned political figure. When I first read about Gary Kasparov, I thought that was just a really interesting character arc for you know, for somebody in a novel to follow. And then I also, of course, stole a lot of moments like that one, like the Deep Blue moment. There's also this point at which a disgruntled former fan hits Alexander over the head with the chessboard.
With a chessboard, yeah.
So I sort of felt at liberty to sort of take whatever I could that was sort of useful or just too strange to not include, and then also to just make things up, as I went along in terms of the plot of the books, because there are certain things about Kasparov that are not included in the book, and then a lot about Alexander. That's good.
So Jennifer, this is your debut novel. I mean, what gave you the inspiration to do this? I mean, this is not your typical. I just don't think it's a complicated book, but it reads nicely. So I mean, you're a very, very skilled writer. How did you come up with this idea? Is that just like, I think I'm gonna be an author, and yes, I've got it.
Yes, it was just one light bulb moment. Well, as I said, I was interested in Russia and post-Soviet countries and geopolitics and chess, and then coming across Kasparov, I just was so intrigued by that story that, I always sort of think that when you're writing a novel, you kind of first have to come up with an idea that's going to absorb your own attention and interest you, because you're the one who's going to read it more than anybody else does. So, so initially, that thread came from just sort of those intellectual interests. And then Irina's story, the woman who's grappling with her Huntington's diagnosis, has sort of more personal origins, because my father had Alzheimer's disease when I was growing up, and so I grew up, against the backdrop of a lot of, pretty grim questions about, cognitive identity versus personal identity, and how you do kind of make meaning of a situation when you know that the outcome is kind of preordained in this way. And so I was interested in writing about a character who was confronting those questions for her own life, and then just because of the particularities of the way that Huntington's works, people can get genetically tested for it, and they can pretty much tell you even within a rough time frame when you're likely to start exhibiting symptoms. And so I kind of found the disease that sort of matched the kind of emotional dilemma that I wanted to put a person in. So that was sort of the origins of her story.
So was this in a way where Irina is going on her own personal quest, dealing with her genetic family history? She deals with this in a certain way with her, what she calls, the lost cause, or what her father would call the lost cause. Was writing this in a way similar for you?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe subconsciously writing a novel felt like my own sort of lost cause pursuit. Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's interesting to me because Irina's she's a very isolated character, really, and she kind of has to be to enable the plot. She sort of runs away from this budding romance she has, and she kind of runs away from her family to go off to Russia, and it's a very sort of odd, thing to do, and I think not something that a lot of people would do, and yet I really enjoyed writing a character who kind of was isolated enough to do something really unusual in the face of such a grim diagnosis.
How long have you been writing? I mean, perhaps not published, but you must have been writing for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I always wrote when I was a kid and growing up, and in college, I certainly didn't see it as any kind of a viable way to organize one's life until after college. When I went to graduate school, in college, I majored in political science and philosophy, and I sort of tried to sort of pursue the political science world, but I just wasn't very good at it.
No, I think that from the political science aspect, you've done some really interesting things here. When I was reading this, and of course this goes up to 2006, I'm feeling like almost like a message is being sent. Watch out, this could be America. We could actually move this way. This could actually happen. I don't know if that was intentional or subliminal or just because of your educational background, but to me it was kind of jumping out like, be careful.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was meant to be kind of more specific to Russia, but it's been so interesting watching the last few months the protests.
Exactly.
And there are so many ways in which some of the things I had researched and written about in my book presented in the past few months, and then there's been all these kind of different aspects of it that have been really interesting. The way that Putin doesn't seem to know how to handle the internet, and he kind of has like no mechanism in place to police that, and how that's now suddenly become this hugely devastating element for him. And and the rise of the middle class and political blogging and that sort of thing. And it's been really interesting to sort of get to, having thought about these things for a long time and researched them for a long time, getting to sort of watch them play out over the past half a year or so.
There's a line in the book which really caught my attention. I just want to ask you if you researched it. It was about Putin having sent a Russian billionaire off to some Siberian detention camp. Mm-hmm. And the question is, do you know how many billionaires there are in Russia? And the answer is like 61 or 62, and that Putin could put every single one of them into jail because he is that rich. Is this historically correct that you know of?
Yeah, well, at the time that I wrote the book, I mean, I don't know if that's the correct number of billionaires now. But
it can only be more billionaires, but he only has more, I'm sure.
Right, yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of the kind of peculiarities of the rants that Alexander Bezatov goes on are often lifted from Kasparov's own thinking, and that is one thread, that's one line that he loves to return to again and again, is just the sort of vast and despicable wealth of Vladimir Putin and how really powerful that makes him, sort of his ability to kind of buy and sell people and allegiances and how little spoken of that, how very wealthy he is.
And it's also quite telling how intelligence services work and how CIA work. As a foreigner, Irina comes to Russia, and the one question that's asked consistently is, who's your customer? Mm-hmm. Which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, they sort of take her to be a representative of American intelligence, which she's not, and she sort of doesn't understand that that's what people are kind of scanning her as initially, just because she's so sort of, it's hard to sort of understand what she's doing there exactly. So yeah, that part of it was kind of fun to write about, because I'm very interested in sort of intrigue and conspiracy theories. I adore, so.
Conspiracy theories, yes. And in fact, you even kind of make a reference there to 9/11 loose change, and at least that's what I got from it, and that Alexander's party is making a Russian version of that.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I think that the film that Alexander and his comrades are trying to make basically makes the case that that Putin and his lackeys were, if not behind, at least had a hand in or tacitly endorsed the series of apartment bombings that happened about a decade ago. And there are a lot of, it was interesting writing about a conspiracy theory, because there's a lot of very sort of damning and suspicious and circumstantial bits of evidence that are a little bit hard to disregard when it comes to that. But it's also, obviously, there's no conclusive. I think that a lot of smart people, I think, are kind of suspicious about this, but would never go so far as to really endorse this theory. So it was kind of interesting writing about that, because I didn't want the book to be read as my actually kind of saying this is what happened or this is what occurred, but at the same time, a lot of people do kind of wonder about it, and a lot of the most sort of interesting and sort of suspicious bits of information or evidence in the book are true. So it was kind of an interesting thing to be writing about that way.
And I think there's a whole niche there. I mean, to write novels around historical events that have huge conspiratorial aspects is extremely interesting, because you actually, you place Alexander at one of the apartment building bombings. As I said, it was really good. You really sucked me in with this. Really enjoyed it. Also, since I had the physical book, which thank you for sending me that, love the rough pages. I'm always loving the physical aspect of that. And you even give a credit to the font maker. That's pretty big. I like that. That's very cool.
Well, I didn't have a hand in the pages of the font maker, but yes, it's nice.
So, obvious question, Jennifer, is what's next for you? I mean, this is what a fantastic debut. People are loving it. You're getting rave reviews. Have you already thought about your next book?
Yeah, I've actually been underway with another project for a little while, which is, I think, kind of nice to still to have something to be looking ahead to. So the next one is about this study abroad student in Argentina who gets accused of murdering her roommate. So it's kind of vaguely based on the story of Amanda Knox, but I'm interested in kind of exploring a lot of the sort of more kind of sort of the political and cultural and sort of psychological dimensions of the story and the ways in which people kind of misunderstand each other, or at least kind of map their own templates of who people are onto them. And so I'm plugging along with that, and it's about 300 pages drafted now, so we'll see.
Well, great. No, well, again, that seems like a fascinating story, taking something that has some basis in factual, historical perspective, and then a novel around. I like that. To me, I've never read anything like it, so I think that's great. I look forward to that one.
Oh, thank you.
So the book is A Partial History of Lost Causes. If you want your very own copy, all you have to do is tap on the blue button overhead or click on the link down below to take you to the Amazon store. You can pick it up from there. Jennifer DuBois, thank you so much. This is really, really good. And good luck. How is it doing, by the way?
I think it's doing okay. It's plugging along,
Plugging along.
One book at a time.
No, it's great. Congratulations. Really, really fun, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.